By the time the clock approached 1 a.m., the crowd inside Duggan's pub was thinning out. The evening was winding down. Musicians were beginning to pack up their equipment, and regulars were finishing up conversations, settling up their tabs. The energy that fills a room during an evening of music was slowly giving way to the quiet reality that it was time to go home. For Gina, home was exactly where she intended to be. Waiting for her were 3 children. Waiting for her was Mike. Waiting for her was a future that finally seemed to be opening up in ways she had hoped for years. Nothing about the evening suggested she planned to go anywhere else. Witnesses would later tell investigators that Gina appeared completely normal. She wasn't upset, she wasn't frightened, and she wasn't involved in any known confrontation. There were no reports of arguments, no reports of threats, no reports of suspicious behavior. In fact, one of the frustrating realities of this case is just how ordinary everything seemed. Ordinary, that is, until it wasn't. This is part 3, the disappearance of Gina Bos. As closing time approached, Gina prepared to leave. She gathered her belongings, and at some point, her guitar, Harley, and sheet music would make their way into her vehicle. Whether she personally placed them there herself or whether someone assisted her remains unclear. What is known is that by the following morning, both would be found inside the trunk of her Saturn. And this detail stands out. The guitar. Harley, the instrument she treasured, the instrument she protected. That steady, beloved instrument she rarely allowed out of her sight. The fact that Harley would later be discovered sitting unattended in a partially opened trunk would become one of the most troubling details in the entire investigation, because it simply didn't fit. Not with the Gina her family knew, not with the Gina her friends knew, not with the woman who treated that guitar almost like a member of the family. Somewhere around 1 a.m. on October 17th, 2000, Gina walked out of Duggan's pub, and that is the last confirmed moment anyone can place her with certainty. According to witnesses, she exited the building and headed to her vehicle, as you'll remember, was parked right across the street. One witness in particular would become important to investigators. A 61-year-old employee of the pub was leaving around the same time. He later reported seeing Gina walking in the direction of her car, an important sighting and detail of the timeline in this case. And it also highlights just how quickly a person can disappear. This employee did not walk with her, and he didn't continue watching her. Instead, he turned and headed in another direction. His attention shifted elsewhere. He heard nothing unusual, no scream, no struggle, no sounds of a confrontation. He simply continued on his way. And somewhere in those moments, Gina slipped from history. This witness never reported seeing her enter her vehicle, only that she was heading toward it. That distinction would become important, because investigators could never establish with certainty whether Gina ever got inside her Saturn that night. Think about that for just a moment. A 40-year-old woman leaves a closing bar, walks to her vehicle, and then nothing. No confirmed sightings, no phone calls, no activity, no trace. It's as though the story simply stops. Inside the pub, people continued cleaning up. The band was still moving their equipment. Musicians came and went. Employees wrapped up their shifts. And the owner would later point out something investigators found difficult to reconcile. Gina's vehicle, her Saturn, was parked only a short distance away. Remember, right across the street. Close enough that if a major struggle had occurred, someone might reasonably expect to hear something. Yet nobody reported hearing anything. Nobody reported seeing anything. No shattered glass, no cries for help, no obvious disturbance. If something happened to Gina near that vehicle, it happened quickly and apparently without attracting attention. And this has haunted investigators for years because whatever occurred in those final moments seems to have unfolded in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, across town, Mike Johnson waited. As far as he knew, Gina would be arriving shortly. Remember, she had dropped him off before heading to the pub, and that plan had been simple. She would pick him up when she was finished. They would head back to her house. But as the night wore on, Gina never arrived. Eventually, tired, Mike fell asleep. At first, there was little reason to panic. After all, people run late. Conversations can sometimes last longer than expected. Perhaps she had stayed to talk with some friends. Perhaps she had become tired and simply gone home. At some point, though, during the early morning hours, Mike woke up and realized Gina still hadn't arrived. He then attempted to reach her through her pager. No response. Again, he tried. Nothing. What Mike did not know was that Gina's pager wasn't with Gina at all. It was sitting there inside her home. Whether she forgot it, whether she intentionally left it behind, or whether that detail has some deeper significance remains unknown. What is known is that every time Mike paged her, the device emitted its familiar alert, the beep, and the beeping rang inside Gina's house. Not with Gina, not wherever she might have been. And the series of beeps eventually woke the children. At first, that probably seemed like a minor annoyance, but within hours, that sound would become something else entirely, a warning, the first indication that something was terribly wrong. As morning approached, concern quickly transformed into alarm. The children knew their mother wasn't home. Mike knew she had never arrived, and family members began communicating with one another. Questions became concerns. Concerns became fears. Where was Gina? That question itself was alarming because everyone involved knew something important. This was not normal behavior, not for Gina. No, not even close. She simply wasn't the type to disappear without explanation. She wasn't the type to leave her children wondering where she was. She wasn't the type to miss work obligations. And Gina certainly wasn't the type to simply walk away from a life she had spent years trying to build. As daylight approached, Mike and one of Gina's friends, Danny, decided to look for her. At first, they considered the possibility of car trouble. Maybe she had broken down. Maybe she was stranded somewhere. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But the longer they searched, the less likely that seemed. Then they returned to Duggan's pub. And there, across the street, they saw something that immediately sent a chill through them. Gina's Saturn, exactly where she had left it, waiting, silent, alone. What they discovered next would change the entire investigation and convince those closest to Gina that this was no ordinary missing persons case. Stay tuned for part 4.